Wow.
Peaches overfilled. Those are super yummy.
Yeah? Was it worth the wait?
This tastes like way better than like usual peaches. That's really good.
Welcome back to the Abundant Harvest Homestead. It's early here this morning. Children are up doing chores. We're getting ready for our day. And yesterday I put out a video. Part of what I covered in there was that while we're giving our land a Sabbath year of rest, that we weren't eating from it. Now I know other people who for the first time in their lives, the Fit Farmer for instance, first time in his life, he's given his land a Sabbath year of rest. And he's eaten that which grows of itself. And I, up until even at the last video, was not fully convinced that's what I should do. So in this video, we're going completely the opposite direction because I now see things differently. And here's the deal, like if you look at a lot of people, and even a lot of those homesteaders who are moving out of the country, trying to get back to the land, trying to take jurisdiction over their own things, there's a lot of believers who are doing that. Now, the Bible may not be your thing, but one thing I've pointed out on this channel before is that if you appreciate me, if you appreciate my wife, if you appreciate my family, then without even knowing it, wow, chuparosa, there's a hummingbird flying around the peach tree right now. But without even knowing it, if you appreciate us, you appreciate what he says, because our entire life right now is based on what he says. There was a time I didn't want a wife. I didn't want children. That was me on my own, apart from God. There was a time when all day I would just try to get drunk and high, and I would lie, and I would cheat, and I would steal. That was me. Doesn't sound like a guy you'd appreciate much, does it? But you add God to the picture, you add obeying him, all of a sudden now we've got some amazing wholesome family who seems to have a decent head on their shoulders, who seems to be doing some things the right way or a decent enough way that people appreciate it and they say, wow, we need more Papa Peppers in the world. We need more Mama Peppers in the world. I wish more children were like yours. Interesting, isn't it? So even if this is not your thing yet, or at the moment, I would encourage you to think about what I'm going to say in this video, because this really is the foundation of our life. I often tell people that when Mama and I met, in the process of trying to love one another, we found one to love more than each other. And that was God. That was his son, our Messiah. That gave us a whole different perspective on everything. And the cool thing is, if I love God more than I love Mama Pepper, then how God says I should love her is what I'm going to apply to my life rather than just coming up with my own way. My own way would fall short. You know, if God made marriage, if that was his idea, what's he got to say about it? And if my wife loves God more than she loves me, then she's going to obey him because of her love for him on how to love me. And he's got a better understanding of everything than we do. On our own, we'd just come up with our own ideas and we would fall short. But he's got a better plan and a better purpose, and it's amazing how it all works out. It really is. So I'm going to show you first of all why I was struggling with eating the fruit from our land when we were given it a Sabbath year of rest. And some people are like, Sabbath, isn't that just like one day a week? Well, there is a weekly Sabbath. It's one of the 10 Commandments, where you don't work or have others work, and you cease from your labors. And there's some people who think that that's a big curse, but I used to work 13 days on, 1 off. And we could give up one of our days off. So we could work 27 days in a row and then take a day off. That can very easily be a curse. To have to work every single day of your life, to have no downtime, to have no refreshment. It's awesome that as servants of the Lord, we get a day off. And you think about even the nation of Israel, when they came out of Egypt, do you think they were getting any days off? No, I don't think so. He was a different type of master than our Lord and Savior is. And I like the master we got now a whole lot better. And there's some people who only say, oh, well, that was only for back in those days, only for the Jews, which, you know, the Jews, if you look at your Bible, that doesn't even show up till way later. It was for all of God's people. Ruth, Rahab, anyone who came in to God's people, it was for them. There was one law for the native born and one law for the stranger who sojourned among them, for those who chose to become God's people. And there are some people who say, well, that's only for in the land. Only when you're in the land of Israel. That's the land you give a rest. And I'll tell you what, one thing is God's commands are not arbitrary. Even if we don't understand why he says to do them, they're not without a purpose. He has them there for a reason. And if you want to talk about the land, well, what do we do with something like this? It says here in Exodus 20:12, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. So do we say, oh, it says the land there. So we're only going to teach our children to honor their mother and their father when they're in the nation of Israel. When they're in the geographical location that we're going to call Israel. And if they're outside of the land, then they don't have to honor their parents. Do you see how that doesn't make any sense? Do you see how that doesn't really work? Well, I'm not really looking to opt out of any blessing that God has for me. I'm not really willing to say, well, he might have not known what he was talking about there. Even if we don't understand, his commandments are not arbitrary. When I tell my children, hey, don't touch the hot stove, at a young age, they don't need to understand why. They just need to know that Dad said don't, and therefore they shouldn't. That's important. And you can see I'm kind of heading a certain direction in this video. If this is not your thing, this is not the main focus of this channel. If this is your thing, we've got a spiritual food for thought channel where the whole thing is just the Bible. The whole thing is just looking through this stuff and sharing some insights you may not have thought of. And part of why, even though I knew other people who were giving their land a Sabbath year of rest, but yet eating from it, part of why I just didn't do that because others did. You know, I didn't say, well, the fit farmer, he's giving his land a Sabbath year of rest, and he's eating from it, so I'll just do that. Part of the reason I didn't want to do that is that I don't want to follow men. I want to follow God. I want to see it for myself from God before I'm convinced of something. And a lot of people, you know, they'll go to their church and they'll just believe whatever their pastor says. You need to be reading the Bible for yourself because there's a lot of different pastors out there. There's a lot of different flavors of Bible believers these days. A lot of different flavors. And whatever theological seminary, you know, your pastor happened to go to, that's what you're going to believe is truth. But a lot of them contradict one another. And a lot of different congregations will say, oh, well, they're wrong over there about this, and they're wrong about this, and they're wrong about this. And they know why everyone else is wrong. But the thing is, to everyone else, you're the other guy. So when you deal with a denomination or a pastor or a seminary, whatever flavor you get, or a study Bible, this one's not a study Bible, you know, but or a study Bible, then whatever flavor you get is what you're going to believe is truth if you just take it at face value. But I want to take God at face value. I want to put my trust in the Lord and not put my confidence in man. Look at Psalm 118, verses 8 and 9. That's what it says there. It's better to trust in the Lord than to put your confidence in man. It's better to trust in the Lord than to put your confidence in princes, which is special men. You could put pastors, priests, popes in there. You could put physicians, psychologists, politicians in there. You could put other special men in there. But I just want to hear and see what God says. So I'm not going to just try to follow man and believe because a man said so. I want to see what God actually says. And then a lot of people these days, they think, oh, well, if something came out in the first majority of the Bible and it wasn't reiterated in the New Testament, maybe that's not for today. Maybe that's for someone else. This is a very common belief system. But the thing is that doesn't make any sense. Even if you read the Bible, it doesn't make any sense. And here's one good example. Here in Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 14, it says, "Thou shalt not curse the deaf, nor put a stumbling block before the blind, but thou shalt fear thy God. I am the Lord." So it says, look, don't curse the deaf. Don't put a stumbling block in front of the blind. And even non-believers would be like, yeah, that'd be a jerk move. You shouldn't do that. But that's Levitical law. That's something from the book of Leviticus. That's not reiterated in the New Testament. Sometimes people go, oh, well, you know, Jesus never said that in the New Testament, nor was it mentioned in the epistles, so therefore it must not be for today. Do we do that with cursing the deaf and putting a stumbling block before the blind? No, we don't. So why do we do that with other ones? Very interesting. So for me, we like to believe God and see that some things He commands forever throughout all your generations, and His commandments are not arbitrary. So here when we deal with the land, you're going to find it in Leviticus 25, where He talks about a Sabbath year of rest for your land. I'm not going to read the whole chapter here, but I'm going to pull out a couple different portions here. It says here in 25:3, 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field nor prune thy vineyard. That which groweth of its own accord of thy harvest thou shalt not reap, neither gather of the grapes of the vine undressed. For it is a year of rest unto the land. And the Sabbath of the land shall be meat for you, for thee, and for thy servant, and for thy maid, and for thy hired servant, and for thy stranger that sojourneth with thee, and for thy cattle, and for the beast that are in thy land, shall all the increase thereof be meat. And meat means food. And it was interesting to kind of look at that and think of it. And it also says a little later on in verse 20, "And if ye say, what shall we eat the 7th year? Behold, we shall not sow nor gather in our increase. Then I will command my blessing upon you in the 6th year, and it shall bring forth fruit for 3 years." Which means that, you know, that next year you're not planting all, and then the year you start planting, it takes a while to get a harvest from there. So it says He'll increase it then. And as I was wondering through this, I'm like, okay, first of all, I'm going to plant and prune for 6 and gather in the harvest thereof. But the 7th, I'm not going to do that. And then it says, that which grows of its own accord, you shall not reap, neither gather the grapes of thy vine undressed, for it's a year of rest. And it says, and the Sabbath of the land shall be meat for you. Meat means food, in the Old English. For thee, and for thy servant, and for thy maid, and for thy hired servant, and for thy stranger that sojourneth with thee. So what we were doing is, okay, we're not planting, we're not pruning, we're not gathering or reaping. It says that food can be, for other people. It does say us on there too, but I'm like, well, how do I not gather? And how do I not harvest and still have it be food for me? That doesn't make sense. And I knew God was right, and I knew that He didn't just come up with stuff that doesn't make sense, but it didn't sit right with me that if He's providing in the 6th year for the 7th, then what do I need? What do I need this harvest for? And if He tells me I'm not harvesting it, then how is it food for me? I go, this is interesting. So I said, all right, for right now, we'll just have other people we know who maybe don't have their own land, or don't have their own gardens, or don't have their own grapes or peach trees or whatever's producing. And maybe we'll just have them come in and reap this, because it says I can't, but it says it is going to be food for somebody. And the cool thing too is, the animals are on here. Okay, this morning, there was a number of peaches that got ripe and fell to the ground. And when I let the ducks out of the coop, they gobbled them up right away, leaving the pits, which is future trees. But I didn't understand how all this fits together. 6th year gives me food in the 7th. I'm not going to harvest or gather in, yet it says it should be food for me? How does that work? And what happened was there's a distinction that until last night I wasn't making. A number of people asked another number of questions and pointed out some stuff, and I've got some answers for some of that. But I think I'm seeing it more in lines with the way that some other people see it now. But again, until I see it for myself and understand it, I don't want to just do it because a man told me. Man is often wrong. Let God be true and every man a liar. God can't be deceived. Man can. So the one thing that came to mind was something that happened on the Sabbath day. And this comes from Matthew 12. And here in Matthew 12, it says something about the Sabbath day, and it makes a distinction here. At that time, Jesus went on the Sabbath day through the corn, and his disciples were a-hungered and began to pluck the ears of corn and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said unto him, Behold, thy disciples do that which is not lawful upon the Sabbath day. But he said unto them, Have ye not read what David did when he was a-hungered, and they that were with him? How he entered into the house of God and did eat the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, neither for them that were with him, but only for the priests? Or have ye not read in the law how that on the Sabbath days the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? But I say unto you that in this place is one greater than the temple. But if ye had known what this meaneth, I will have mercy and not sacrifice, ye would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath day. So a couple things here. His disciples were going through the corn, and they were hungry, and they began to pluck ears of corn and eat. Now the Pharisees said that what they were doing was not lawful on the Sabbath day. You're not going to find where God says that this is not lawful on the Sabbath day. Why? Well, for one, Jesus, who says he's the Lord of the Sabbath here, says that they are guiltless. They're not guilty of doing anything wrong. In fact, if we back up to Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 25, we find that they were actually obeying the commandment of God. When thou comest into the standing corn of thy neighbor, then thou mayest pluck the ears with thine hand, but thou shalt not move a sickle unto thy neighbor's standing corn. So, rather than saying there is no Sabbath, which is what many people conclude, this is one of the 10 commandments, right? They say the first 4 is how we love God, and the next 6 is how we love our neighbor as ourselves, and all God's commands fit in those 2 categories. But while they say the first 4 are how we love God, then they say we'll give him 75%. He says, search for me with your whole heart. And if this sounds strange to you, think, pray, read. Don't just outrightly reject it, because it's not the tradition that you were raised with. Think about these things. I didn't see it until I began to meditate on the law. In Psalm 1, it talks about a man who is blessed. And it says his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And I thought, well, I want to be blessed. I don't want to be cursed. Well, then I'm going to delight in the law of the Lord, and I'm going to meditate in his law day and night. And his law is big. So I decide I'll let myself off easy as a beginner, somebody who hasn't really meditated in the law. I'll just start with the 10 Commandments. So I began to start with the 10 Commandments, and what I noticed is things that we think are horrible. Like murder. He says, thou shalt not kill. Neither shalt thou steal. Gives 4 words to things like that, but both times, in Exodus 20 and in Deuteronomy 5, we find that 4 verses are given on the Sabbath. And he puts a lot of stuff in there about the Sabbath. And one time, he makes an appeal to when his people were in bondage in Egypt. Another time, he makes an appeal to the fact that after making everything and creating the world and all that is therein, in 6 days, he rested. So from creation, there was a Sabbath. And he says it's going to be a sign between him and his people forever throughout all their generations. But even in the 10 Commandments, he puts a huge emphasis on it. And if you're meditating on the law of God, you really find it. You really see that he puts a huge emphasis on it. And it becomes rather apparent, maybe I need to think on this more. So I began to think on it. But here, the disciples are walking through the corn, and they grab with their hand and they eat. Now, these Pharisees, according to their traditions, and here's a huge thing, Judaism is not what God commands in the Old Testament, and Christianity is not what God commands in the New Testament. That's not how it works. In fact, when you see Jesus show up on the scene, he often says, by your traditions, you make the commandment of God of none effect. So they came up with their own religion, they came up with their own idea, and it has a flavor of the things in the Old Testament. But to actually obey that, they'd have to reject what God really said. And people don't make this distinction. You know, they really don't. So when they say they're doing that which is not lawful on the Sabbath, well, that's according to their tradition. Jesus, as Lord of the Sabbath, says they're guiltless. So he's not lying to them and saying it's okay for them to break the Sabbath. He's saying they're not breaking the Sabbath. Here it says, when you're in your neighbor's standing corn, it's okay to grab a snack if you're hungry. But you don't put a sickle to it and you don't harvest it. So there's a difference, and just as those Pharisees would have no problem grabbing a piece of food off of a plate and eating it on the Sabbath, picking from a tree and eating on the Sabbath isn't a very different motion, is it? They took an offense to it, but God says it's not wrong. So I already had that distinction in my mind as I was trying to sort through this Sabbath year of rest. And then what I thought is, okay, and this is last night, you know, this is fresh to me, but it's starting to click. He's going to provide extra in the 6th year so that you can store up and have, you know, a pantry or a root cellar or stored goods, however we may do that in the time period in which we live, to have food on hand for that next year when you're not gardening. And that next year when you're not gardening, you're not going to be planting, and you're not going to be pruning, and you're not going to be harvesting or gathering in. Just as you're not going to put a sickle to the standing corn of your neighbor, you're not going to be gathering in and putting up a harvest because it's going to rest. But it's going to provide food for you and for your servant, for your neighbor, for the stranger that sojourns with you, and for the animals. How? Well, if I grab, just like the disciples were doing on the Sabbath day, if I grab that fruit and eat it, I'm not gathering in a harvest. I'm not putting anything up. I'm not replacing the store that is in my pantry or my root cellar. I have that from the previous year, according to this, right? And I'm not reaping the harvest, I'm not pruning it, but I can grab something. Well, if you've ever gardened before, why do we put things up? Why do we preserve things? Well, sure, one is to have food for the future, but the other is the harvest comes in and you've got piles. Who wants to eat, 100 tomatoes in a day? Well, even so with our peach tree or our grapes, it's more than we would want to eat for ourselves. So while you're taking it eating fresh, you're not picking all of it to preserve. Therefore, there's food for others, and then there's food for the animals too if you don't have enough others grabbing it. And as I realized that, last night, it started to make sense for me. So even in the last video, I'm talking about how we're not eating from our land and how that's good. And of course it is good. We're not commanded that we have to. Okay? We're not commanded we have to. But it is permissible. And as something that's permissible, we're free to do it, but you're also free not to. This is why I like to refer to our rights as freedoms. We have the freedom to peaceably assemble. We have the freedom to bear arms. Why? Because sometimes people say, it's your right. And they imply that it's wrong if you don't. Right and wrong is different than a freedom to or a freedom to not. So I like to make that distinction, and here it's the same thing. Apparently, we're free to eat from our land. That which is fresh, without gathering in and without putting up, and still allow the land to rest. And this is some of the stuff where without walking through it, there's been things about the weekly Sabbath that without walking through it, we had no clue. A lot of times people have no frame of reference for like the feasts, because they kind of read about it. There was always for somebody else back in the day, but he talks about them in the New Testament. We see Paul and others attending feasts in the New Testament, and we see them in the future too. Look at the end of Zechariah sometimes, and look at the end of Isaiah sometimes. Look at those. We see that in the future, there's Sabbaths, there's new moons, there's feasts, there's dietary law, there's all sorts of stuff in the future. So in the future, he's going to be just like he was in the past. And he already told us he doesn't change. For me, his ways are best. And I've said that even before I applied a lot of it. You know, being taught a lot of things weren't for us, or weren't for the church now, or weren't for, you know, his people now. I was taught, you know, I still understood that his ways were best. I just didn't understand how many of them we could apply in a way that made sense. So this is my faith, guys. And my faith is developing as I walk with God and study his word. That's where I'm at on this. You have your own faith, but again, there's only really one faith that God is looking for from his people. So I would recommend you to read this whole book on a regular basis. I know there's several of my children to whom they've heard me read this entire book out loud to the family multiple times. You know, I want to continue that. In fact, once chores are done and some other things, we're going to go in and read together as a family. That's important to us. But I want my children too, not just to believe it because I say it, but to believe it because God says it. And in this case, all of my children, from the littlest ones all the way up to Mama Pepper and I, you know, the entire family, was realizing how good these peaches were, for example, and yet fully willing to only let somebody else receive that blessing. We had no problem with that. And I think that's a good place to be. Even one of the guys who harvested some of the grapes for his family, he said, wow, I didn't realize at the time that you guys hadn't even tasted any of this. He says that says a lot about your love for God and for others, that you're willing to just completely forego the blessing of being able to eat that to bless others. And again, it wasn't sitting right with me because I couldn't exactly explain why. If the year before has provided my food this year, then what do I need it for? And if I'm not supposed to gather it or harvest it, then how am I going to eat it? And there's a distinction made between what he calls gathering and harvesting. Gathering in, putting up a store, you know, preserving it, having it for the future, and simply eating fresh directly from the vine or the plant or the tree. It makes sense to me now, but until it did, I wasn't going to just do it. So hopefully that gives you a taste of where we're coming from as a family. And I love the fact that I can have 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds and other stuff and say, okay, well, if that's not what we're supposed to do, then we're not going to do it. They're okay with that. Now when I tell them and explain them from his word how this works, how I'm now seeing it, they're going to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And they're going to know that God is right all the time. But I'm not all the time. And I don't want my children just to understand my authority. Yes, I have an authority over them. But one day they're going to leave my home. And I want them to understand God's authority. Because that is going to stay over them when they leave my home. That's going to be better for them in the long run. As I mentioned about my life before, I had a pretty terrible, horrible life left to my own, apart from God. I don't want that for my children. And not that everyone without God goes and does those things, but people with God really don't. If they're actually walking with God and obeying him, they're not going to be a drunkard who's lying and stealing and doing drugs all the time. That's not going to happen. So I think I may have to have a Bible study with my children and my wife and show them this. And then we're going to come out and enjoy some peaches. Stay tuned for that.
I can smell the peaches.
You can?
Mm-hmm.
So, here's the thing, guys. Hey, don't start yet. We got some friends coming over later to have some. Because that was a previously arranged thing. We told them they'd come over and grab some. So I think right now, we're going to probably pick and then split. So every one of us is going to enjoy a half a peach. We'll let them come over and pick whatever else is ripe. And then if there's more in the future, we'll enjoy that. But we want to be people of our words. We told our friends, they come over and have some. So we're not going to just eat our fill and have none for them. We're going to enjoy this, but you learn by doing. And even right now, do you guys understand why I was thinking what I was thinking before and why it didn't make sense to me?
Yes, sir.
Do you understand why this makes sense to me now?
Yes, sir.
And were you guys all ready? Were you all ready to just wait another year before you tasted anything?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you feel now that you can stand in here and smell them and know that actually we can eat them?
Good.
Good. Okay. Darling, feel this one here because you can probably reach it from the ground and see if it's ready.
It feels nice and soft, yeah.
Does it? Well, why don't you pull that down?
I think it.
And Pinky, would you bring that knife over?
Look at all these baby ducks at our feet. They're so friendly.
They're everywhere.
Wow, look at how pretty that
Darling.
is.
Darling.
So tasty.
My lady, you may have first bite for our family. If you can do so with a clean conscience and all obedience.
As Papa likes to say, it is a happy day for my people.
Yes.
All right, here we go.
I saw juices come out, my lady.
Wow. Oh my. That was so delicious.
Really? Oh, darling. And
Yummy.
it was just because I told the neighbor to stop brush hogging when he was going to chop down a bunch of these. This is not a special peach. It's just one that grew from seed. Yeah?
That is so
Could you cut us each a slice of that one?
These things are flying machines. They get like, I don't
Look
know.
at all
how
those
many
little
flies
ones.
a
They're
minute.
looking for if any more peaches hit the ground, they're ready to gobble them up. When I let them out this morning, they cleaned up those which were...
Yeah,
Pinky? Pinky?
They choose peaches over food.
Those are super yummy.
Yeah? Was it worth the wait?
This tastes like way better than like usual peaches. Like
Yeah.
super good.
Do you remember when you were smelling the other day and thinking about it? How does it feel now?
Great.
Does it taste as good as it smells?
Better. It tastes better than it smells.
And it smelled so good.
Like those little white things on it, like those. I don't know. They taste really good.
Oh yeah. Son?
That's really good.
Yeah. And thank you guys too for being willing to wait another year. You know, if that's what we're supposed to do, we're just gonna do what we're supposed to do. We're gonna train ourselves to appreciate that. We get a blessing of being able to eat it this year. And so we'll enjoy that.
It tastes really good.
Are you ready? Are you excited about it? Does it taste like a peach?
Yeah.
And you like it?
Yeah.
Awesome. Where'd Bug go?
I think he's organizing.
He's organizing.
I guess I'll go while we wait for Bug. Oh wow. The peach is like squishing as she... Oh, it smells amazing, first of all. Oh yeah. And that's one thing too, like, from looking at the color of it, it was kind of like a greenish orange. So we weren't really even realizing at first that they were getting ripe. There's some that definitely look nicer, but even at this stage, they're...
Yeah. It's like a...
And where's that tin can? Bring me that tin can quick before we get Bug his. On this ground right now, there's a good amount of peach pits. Look at this. These are from, because like I said, we didn't realize they were ripening. This is our first time having this tree really fruit like this, and we weren't eating from it in previous years because we were giving it the first, 5 years before we were gonna eat from it. So we got all these pits, but that's what this tree came from. And now that we kind of know what it looks like when it's ripe, now we understand better Yeah. We understand better what it looks like when it's ripe, so I look forward to a lot more of these trees in the future. Bug, it is your time. He was completely willing to wait for this, but now that he doesn't have to, he's happy not to, right? If you had to wait a whole nother year to taste it, you would?
Yeah.
Yeah. If that's what we decided God wanted, yeah. Yeah?
There's some right over there.
Is there? Oh yeah, I forgot about the other tree. That's going to come in handy. Now guys, I want one of the beautiful ones
Right up
out
there?
of here.
I'll get it.
I'm thinking that guy there. The one with the red on it?
That one right there. Whoa, did I hit a piece?
Yeah, carefully. Don't knock them off.
Move your hands.
That one on, of the three that's this way?
Ooh, this one?
Hold on, yeah.
I'll get it then. I thought you were talking about this one. I was like, oh, that's not very beautiful, but yeah.
No, that one of those three. Nice and gentle so you don't knock the rest off. You might have to twist a bit. Okay. Oh, and get that next one too.
Okay. But I have to climb the ladder to get it. I got it.
Okay, let me see those. Now that looks more like peaches.
Yeah.
You know, can you wipe? Oops, good catch. It's got some little leakage on it, but doesn't that look amazing? That coloration. I think that might be maybe just because that's where it's up in the sun.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. Some of the ones hanging down here were more, you know, just this color when they're ripe, which is kind of a greenish orange. Oh, darling. And today is a happy day for my people. For sure. Yeah?
Look at that baby duck, it's so cute.
Why don't we cut that one into quarters? And...
Okay. The same as last time?
Quarters.
Oh, big.
Yeah. Just quadrants. Yeah, cut it in half and then cut it in half the other way so each person can have a full quarter.
Okay.
Huh? And look at that. They're going around trying to find the little flies that are on. Yeah. They're on the peach pits and their poop.
They catch so many.
So
Wow. Yeah. I'm gonna snap some photos
Look
for the
at
cover.
this, how much orange. This one is so much better. It's like oranger and it's so much sweeter.
So much.
Let's try that.
Wow. That is really good.
I've never tasted a peach like this before.
Really? Guys, this is so cool.
All the duck moms are sad because their babies are on the other side of the fence.
that was extra. Oh.
Well, then we get one more person up in the tree or the ladder and just search for if there's any other ones that look really like that. I know there was a couple over there that might be.
Let me peek over here.
You may.
I know there's one that's really yellow over there. I'm looking. Oh, I see one.
Do you think so? So
there's this one right here. I'll get.
we're just looking for the best one right now because it's not till this afternoon that our friends are coming over, so they might have a chance to
I think this
ripen between here and then.
Hold on.
What do you think, darling? Are you ready for peach pies and peach cobbler and peaches, hot, warm peaches over ice cream and stuff in the future?
Oh, yeah.
And
So good.
we should have a peach pit planting party when we get back to gardening.
We've never had our own fresh peaches before, ever.
Ever. Never.
Don't chase them.
This is
They're
so
friendly.
cool.
They'll come up to you. Here's this one.
Wow, that's what I'm talking about. Show me that
I think we might
spot
save
again.
this one for Baby Bear.
Yes.
Baby Bear didn't get one yet.
Yeah. We'll save one for him.
Really.
Wow, guys. This is happy. We're going to leave whatever else is ripe for our friends. You got the whole peach?
Right here.
Oh, take the whole peach in for the for later, for the little guy when he gets up. Hold on. It's part of it, guys. You know, if you think about our Creator, And our Savior, what did our Savior give up for us? Everything, right? Everything. He laid down his life for us. So we can't lay down, what, a temptation? Oh, I really want that now. If that's the deal, and he says no, we're completely fine with that. As adults, and a lot of adults are, oh, I want things my way right now. I don't care. That's fine. You can be that way. You're certainly free to. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't mean we won't be held accountable for our actions. But to raise a family that is that willing, just to say, okay, if that's what it looks like to obey in this situation, then I'm willing to do it. But as we study and apply, sometimes we come to understand more. And when we realize, like we did this time, you know, I was wrong. I didn't understand. And I wasn't just going to follow man, though. I wanted to see it for myself. So it gave me an opportunity to see it for myself. And it makes sense now. That makes sense. To eat fresh, picked from the thing, is not the same as reaping a harvest and putting it up. The 6th year provides the harvest that's going to be stored up. The 7th year, you're not going to prune or plant, but things will be growing of itself. And if you're eating that fresh, it's going to be food for you. But it's going to be so much food that it's not going to be just for you, because you're not putting any up and you're not a glutton. So that's going to be for others and for the animals. And as you saw with those pits, because, you know, I've got a neighbor up the street, he's got a different kind of peach. It's like glowing red. It looks like a vibrant apple. Maybe our peaches were gonna turn like that. We didn't know, because it's a young tree. And sometimes in the past, we would actually pick off the fruit early and just not let it set fruit. Like when you had little ones, we've knocked them all off before. Why? Because that's what a lot of people do anyway, as the tree gets established and the roots gets established. So now that we know what they look like when they're ripe, now that we know what they smell like when they're ripe and what they taste like, we'll be getting bigger harvests in the future. And even another 7 years from now, when we give our land a rest, yeah, we'll be having a lot of good fresh peaches through the days, but so will some other people. And you know, even this is an abundant harvest because of obedience. That's fins and scales. That's what God said. He said the waters will bring forth things with fins and scales for you, and that's going to be, you know, the food from the waters. And some people, I'm going to tell you something right now, and I'm not trying to brag or other things, but when I first came across this, and I said, wow, we're going to take a Sabbath year of rest for our land, it was a shock. And I realized full well it was the worst time in my entire life to not have a garden, is right now. But I'm not going to disobey God because I'm afraid, you know. I'm not going to disobey God because of my evaluation of things. No, He knew from time everlasting what would happen, and His commands are His commands for a reason. Okay. Once I got over the initial shock, then I realized all the other things I was going to be able to get done because of the time it was going to free me up. Without all the hours that I was going to invest in the garden, I would have more time for other things. So I think this lean-to went up this year. The mini barn got finished this year. The smokehouse got built from scratch this year. The root cellar is being progressed upon. I've spent a lot of time working away from home, earning money this year. It freed me up for a lot of other things. And even learning how to jug fish gar, you know, that took time. That took hours. Those hours could have been in the garden. So once I got past that, I began to be like, oh, this is going to be cool. And, you know, there's more than one way to put things in store. Not everyone would grow their own stuff. Some people would buy stuff too. And there's people who are like, oh man, I'm just so concerned for your family. You know, if you're not gardening, like, do you even have stuff stored up? First of all, we've got a lot of produce of a lot of things from a lot of years in the house. It'll go in the root cellar eventually. Also, you know, we've got a lot of stuff on hand because we got mouths to feed. And I can still get some cans of vegetables or other things for just over 50 cents right now. Is that going to be that way come this fall? Is that going to be this way come this winter? Is that going to be this way later? Probably not. Probably not. So therefore, while my 50 cents still gets me that, I'll do it. Rather than taking my 75 cents and getting 50% less later. Is this guy's turn come up?
Yeah.
Oh, guys, this is a perfect close to the video. Again, this is not the way videos normally go on here as far as all the Bible stuff. That Bible is the basis of our life. But I have another channel I linked earlier just for those purposes. And if that's your thing, feel free to join us over there. This guy is going to get to taste a peach from our own tree.
He saw it on the counter and he goes, apple, apple.
Oh yeah? Let's see if we can bring it out here. Okay. Just because the lighting's better. The cicadas are louder out here, but the lighting's better. So we're going to watch this little guy enjoy this harvest first. And then we'll shut down this video. I hope that makes sense to you guys. I hope you understand it now. It makes sense to me and I understand it better now. I was wondering, I was trying to figure it out. Now it makes sense. And all I had to do was apply a little bit of other stuff. Distinctions made between, you know, picking and eating and reaping a harvest and putting up. And distinctions made, you know, between what's permissible and even the Sabbath day. We can talk about the Sabbath year, you know. Cut across there, yep. Here she goes. Okay, like that. And then I'm going to rotate it. We're going to go that way.
I can.
Okay, and now we're going to pop it.
I don't know how I'm popping it.
Hold on.
I did it.
Oh, that's awesome. Let's see what this little guy thinks. Hey, buddy. That's for you from our tree.
Try it.
That's what the ducks have been eating. Peach.
Is it good?
Yep. It's a good breakfast. Wake up and enjoy some of that, huh? Thank you for joining me. Appreciate your time. And ultimately the commandments of God aren't arbitrary. They're for a reason, whether we understand that reason or not. And there's also an appropriate way of walking them out. I just had to see how that all fit together before I was willing to make it to this point. I was wrong. But we weren't, you know, disobedient in it. Could have been disobedient in ignorance. Could have been. We just simply were abstaining from something that was permissible. And since we now know it is permissible, we're no longer abstaining, right? Mm-hmm. We're enjoying. So we'll see you next time. Papa out.